Hello, good evening. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Michael Reed's. Is it possible, please, if I could get a sound check from anyone? Just give me a quick thumbs up just to let me know that the sound is okay. And when we've confirmed that, then we can continue. Yeah, looks like everything is going okay. But yeah, I hope you've all had a good day, and thank you for taking your time to be here with me. I'm just sort of still trying to set everything up so that this live stream is nice and flawless for you guys. But if you're new here, um, this is Michael Reed's, and this channel exists for one simple reason, to remind ourselves that reading, learning, and thinking deeply still matters, especially in a world where um, it constantly pulls our attention in every direction. I read from real books. I've got my copy here. Physical books, I don't read the summaries. There's no screens because I believe there's something powerful about slowing down, about choosing a book, opening it, and committing to being present with it. It's a habit that I've adopted, and I'd love it to be a lifelong habit. Um, so this channel, I'm not with this channel. I'm not trying to be perfect or articulate or impressive. It's just about showing up consistently, honestly, and with intention. That's something I'm trying to in my own life every single day. So if any part of this resonates with you, please consider liking the video or sharing it or subscribing. I mean, it costs absolutely nothing, but it helps the space reach people who may need it. So in the previous chapter, we explored courage. Now, courage and the version of courage from Bushido is not the version of courage that is loud, reckless, or fueled by ego. Uh, Bushido speaks about courage as something much quieter and much rarer. The courage to act according to principle, even when it would be easier to avoid responsibility, or stay silent or take the comfortable route. It's the courage to tell the truth when it's inconvenient, the courage to stay disciplined when motivation disappears, and the courage to live deliberately rather than being pushed around by impulse. So that kind of courage requires a lot of maturity, a lot of restraint and awareness. And without those, courage quickly becomes or turns into chaos. So, which brings us naturally into today's chapter, chapter 5 of Bushido, Benevolence, which is often described as the feeling of distress, the ability to genuinely recognize suffering in others and respond with care. Right? So, in the way of the warrior, as described in Bushido. Benevolence was not a weakness. It is something that was expected. So a warrior was trained to be strong, skilled, and capable, but also measured, calm, and responsible. So benevolence is what keeps strength from being destructive. It's what reminds us that power is something to be controlled, not displayed. So true benevolence shows itself in how we treat people when there's nothing to gain, when no one is watching, and when patience would be easier to abandon. So, with that little introduction to the chapter, uh, I'll just have a quick sip of a drink. And we will now get into the paper bag. So this is your chance to grab your drink. If you're not keen on watching, it's great to just listen as well. That's what I'm here for. So benevolence, the feeling of distress, love, magnanimity, affection for others, sympathy and pity, which were recognized to be supreme virtues, the highest of all the attributes of the human soul. Benevolence was deemed a princely virtue in a twofold sense. Princely among the manifold attributes of the noble spirit, princely as particularly befitting a princely profession. We needed no Shakespeare to feel, though perhaps, like the rest of the world, we needed him to express it. That mercy became a monarch better than his crown, that it was above his sceptred sway. How often both Confucius and Mencius repeat the highest requirement of a ruler of men to consist in benevolence. Confucius would say, "Let but a prince cultivate virtue, people will flock to him. With people will come to him lands. Lands will bring forth for him wealth. Wealth will give him the benefit of right uses. Virtue is the root and wealth and an outcome." Again, never has there been a case of a sovereign loving benevolence and the people not loving righteousness. Mencius follows close at the heels and says, instances are on record where individuals attained to supreme power in a single state without benevolence, but never have I heard of a whole empire falling into the hands of one who lacked this virtue. Also, it is impossible that any one should become ruler of the people to whom they have not yielded the subjection of their hearts, both defined with indispensable requirement in a ruler by saying, benevolence, benevolence is man. Under the regime of feudalism, which could easily be perverted into militarism, it was to benevolence that we owed our deliverance from despotism of the worst kind. An utter surrender of life and limb on the part of the governed would have left nothing for the governing but self will, and this has for its natural consequence the growth of what absolutism, so often called Oriental despotism, as though there were no despots of Occidental history. Let it be far from me to uphold despotism of any sort, but it is a mistake to identify feudalism with it. When Frederick the Great wrote that kings are the first servants of the state, jurists thought rightly that a new era was reached in the development of freedom. Strangely coinciding in time, in the backwoods of northwestern Japan, Yozan of Yonezawa made exactly the same declaration, showing that feudalism was not all tyranny and oppression. A feudal prince, although unmindful of owing reciprocal obligations to his vassals, felt a higher sense of responsibility to his ancestors and to heaven. He was a father to his subjects when heaven entrusted to his care. In a sense not usually assigned to the term, Bushido accepted and corroborated paternal government, paternal also as opposed to the less interested avuncular government. The difference between the despotic and the paternal government lies in this, that in the one the people obey reluctantly, while in the other they do so with the proud submission, that dignified obedience, that subordination of heart which kept alive, even in servitude itself, the spirit of exalted freedom. The old saying is not entirely false, which called the King of England the King of Devils because of his subjects. Often insurrections against and depositions of their princes, in which made the French monarch the King of Asses because of their infinite taxes and impositions, but which gave the title of the King of Men to the sovereign of Spain because of his subjects' willing obedience. But enough, virtue and absolute power may strike the Anglo-Saxon mind as terms which it is impossible to harmonize. Pobedonostov has clearly set before us the contrast of the foundations of English and other European communities, namely that these were organized on the basis of common interest, while that was distinguished by a strongly developed independent personality. What this Russian statesman says of the personal uh, dependence of individuals on some social alliance and in the ends of the state among the continental nations of Europe and particularly among Slavonic peoples is doubly true of the Japanese. Hence, not only is a free exercise of monarchical power not felt as heavily by us as in Europe, but it is generally moderated by parental consideration for the feelings of the people. Absolutism, says Bismarck, primarily demands in the ruler impartiality, honesty, devotion to duty, energy, and inward humility. If I may be allowed to make one more quotation on this subject, I will cite from the speech of the German Emperor of Koblenz, in which he spoke of kingship by the grace of God, with its heavy duties, its tremendous responsibility to the Creator alone, from which no man, no minister, no parliament can release the monarch. We know benevolence was a tender virtue and mother-like. If upright, rectitude and stern justice were peculiarly masculine. Mercy had the gentleness and the persuasiveness of feminine nature. We were warned against indulging in indiscriminate charity without seasoning it with justice and rectitude. Masamun expressed it well in his oft quoted aphorism: rectitude carried to excess hardens into stiffness. Benevolence indulged beyond measure sinks into weakness. Fortunately, mercy was not so rare as it was beautiful, for it is universally true that the bravest are the tenderest, the loving are the daring. Bushi no Nasaki, the tenderness of a warrior, had a sound which appealed at once to whatever was noble in us. Not that the mercy of a samurai was generically different from the mercy of any other being, but because it implied mercy where mercy was not a blind impulse, but where it recognized due regard to justice, and where mercy did not remain merely a certain state of mind, but where it was backed with power to save or kill. As economists speak of demand as being effectual or ineffectual, similarly, we may call the mercy of Bushi effectual, since it implied the power of acting for the good or detriment of the recipient. Priding themselves as they did in their brute strength and privileges to turn it into account, the samurai gave full consent to what Mencius taught concerning the power of love. Benevolence, he says, brings under its sway whatever hinders its power. Just as water subdues fire, they only doubt the power of water to quench flames who try to extinguish with a cupful a whole burning wagon load of faggots. He also says that the feeling of distress is the root of benevolence. Therefore, a benevolent man is ever mindful of those who are suffering and in distress. Thus did Mencius long anticipate Adam Smith, who founds his ethical philosophy on sympathy. It is indeed striking how closely the code of knightly honor of one country coincides with that of others. In other words, how the much abused Oriental ideas of morals find their counterparts in the noblest maxims of European literature. If the well known lines, Hei tibi urent artes, prosic imponere morem, pacere subjectis et debellere superbos, were shown a Japanese gentleman, he might readily accuse the Mantuan bard of plagiarizing from the literature of his own country. Benevolence to the weak, the downtrodden, or the vanquished was ever extolled as peculiarly becoming to a samurai. Lovers of Japanese art must be familiar with the representation of a priest riding backwards on a cow. The rider was once a warrior who, in his day, made his name a byword of terror. In that terrible battle of Sumano-ura, 1184 AD, which was one of the most decisive in our history, he overtook an enemy and in single combat had him in the clutch of his gigantic arms. Now, the etiquette of war required that on such occasions no blood should be spilt, unless the weaker party proved to be a man of rank or ability equal to that of the stronger. The grim combatant would have the name of the man under him, but he refusing to make it known, his helmet was ruthlessly torn off. When the sight of a juvenile face, fair and beardless, made the astonished knight relax his hold. Helping the youth to his feet, in paternal tones, he bade the stripling go. Off, young prince, to thy mother's side. The sword of Kumagai shall never be tarnished by a drop of thy blood. Haste and flee o'er young pass before thy enemies come in sight. The young warrior refused to go and begged Kumagaye for the honor of both to dispatch him from the spot. Above the hoary head of the veteran gleams the cold blade, which many a time before he sundered the cords of life. But his stout heart quails. There flashes athwart his mental eye the vision of his own boy, who this self same day marched to the sound of bugle to try his maiden arms. The strong hand of the warrior quivers. Again he begs his victim to flee for his life. Finding all his entreaties vain and hearing the approaching steps of his comrades, he exclaims, "If thou art overtaken, thou mayest fall at a more ignoble hand than mine. O thou infinite, receive his soul." In an instant the sword flashes in the air, and when it falls, it is red with adolescent blood. When the war is ended, we find our soldier returning in triumph, but little cares he now for honor or fame. He renounces his warlike career, shaves his head, dons a priestly garb, devotes the rest of his days to holy pilgrimage, never turning his back to the west, where lies the paradise whence salvation comes, and whither the sun hastes daily for rest. Critics may point out flaws in this story, which is casuistically vulnerable. Let it be all the same, it shows that tenderness, pity, and love were traits which adorned the most sanguinary exploits of the samurai. It was an old maxim among them that it becometh not the fowler to slay the bird which takes refuge in his bosom. This in a large measure explains why the Red Cross movement, considered peculiarly Christian, so readily found a firm footing among us. For decades before we heard of the Geneva Convention, Bacon, or our greatest novelist, had familiarized us with the medical treatment of a fallen foe. In the Principality of Satsuma, noted for its martial spirit and education, the custom prevailed for young men to practice music, not the blast of trumpets or beat of drums, those clamorous harbingers of blood and death, stirring us to imitate the actions of a tiger, but sad and tender melodies of the biwa, soothing our fiery spirits, drawing our thoughts away from scent of blood and scenes of carnage. Polybius tells us that the constitution of Acadia, which required all youths under 30 to practice music in order that this gentle art might alleviate the rigors of that inclement region. It is to its influence that he attributes the absence of cruelty in that part of the Akkadian mountains. Nor was Satsuma the only place in Japan where gentleness was inculcated among the warrior class. A prince of Shirakawa jots down his random thoughts, and among them is the following: though they come stealing to your bedside in the silent watches of the night, drive not away, but rather cherish these: the fragrance of flowers, the sound of distant bells, the insect humming of a frosty night, and again, though they may wound your feelings, these three you have only to forgive: the breeze that scatters your flowers, the cloud that hides your moon, and the man who tries to pick quarrels with you. It was ostensibly to express, but actually to cultivate these gentler emotions that the writing of verses was encouraged. Our poetry has therefore a strong undercurrent of pathos and tenderness. A well known anecdote of rustic samurai illustrations. Samurai illustrates a case in point. When he was told to learn versification and the warbler's notes was given him for the subject of his first attempt, his fiery spirit rebelled, and he flung at the feet of his master this uncouth production, which ran: the brave warrior keeps apart the ear that might listen to the warbler's song. His master, undulated by this crude sentiment, continued to encourage the youth until one day the music of his soul was awakened to respond to the sweet notes of the uguisu, and he wrote: stands the warrior, mailed and strong, to hear the uguisu song, warbled sweet the trees among. We admire and enjoy the heroic incident in Corner's short life, when, as he lay wounded on the battlefield, he scribbled his famous farewell to life. Incidents of a similar kind were not at all unusual in our warfare. Our pithy epigrammatic poems were particularly well suited to the improvisation of a single sentiment. Everybody of any education was either a poet or a poetaster. Not infrequently, a marching soldier might be seen to halt, take his writing utensils from his belt, and compose an ode. And such papers were found afterwards in the helmet or the breastplate when these were removed from their lifeless wearers. What Christianity has done in Europe towards rousing compassion in the midst of belligerent horrors, love of music and letters has done in Japan. The cultivation of tender feelings breeds considerate regard for the sufferings of others. Modesty and complacence, actuated by respect for others' feelings, are not the root of politeness. Wow, that brings an end to chapter 5 benevolence. Um, yeah, I do apologize for some of my pronunciations in there. I'm still getting to grips with the reading. Like I've mentioned, it's becoming more and more and more of a healthy habit, and it's allowing my mind to process things a lot quicker. But there are still some things that will trip me up, so I do apologize, and I ask for your patience as I know that I am going to improve as time goes by. So I've got some closing thoughts on that chapter, um, and what I think about benevolence. I've got some notes here. So what benevolence really forces me to reflect on is how much um, inner order affects outer behavior. The more disciplined my own mind becomes, the calmer and more considered my actions are towards others. So for me, personal growth has never arrived through sudden breakthrough. It's uh, my personal growth has come through repetition. I'm reading a few pages each day, thinking instead of reacting, and choosing, long term stability over short term comfort. So my mental growth changes, you know, and mental growth itself, it changes the way you experience life itself. So when your mind is scattered, everything feels urgent and overwhelming. But when your mind is organized, even difficult situations feel more manageable. So that to me is consciousness. It's not being perfect, but being aware enough to pause, reflect, and respond intentionally. So success is often misunderstood, and then in my experience, um, real success is quiet. Success looks like structure. It looks like consistency, and it looks like taking responsibility mainly of your health, because your health is your wealth, and without health, everything else eventually collapses. So when you look after your body, you protect your energy. When you protect your energy, you protect your ability to think clearly and work steadily, and show up for others. So benevolence also, it reframes the way we think about wealth or money matters. Money matters, of course, but that's not um, the foundation. The foundation is stability in our habits, in our routine, and in our relationships. I've learned that organizing time properly is one of the most compassionate things that I can do for myself, and for the people who rely on me. So um, I realize that when my time is chaotic, my mind becomes chaotic, and when my mind is chaotic, I unintentionally pass that disorder onto others. So what I aim to do is, you know, uh, continue with life by showing up consistently, even when tired or when I'm distracted or uninspired. And this is what slowly removes unnecessary problems from life. And being free of problems doesn't mean like you live without challenges. It just means that you've built enough inner structure to face challenges without panic, without resentment, or any sort of avoidance. So reading has been a powerful uh, medium, and is a great example of this for me. So I don't just rush through a book. You know, I return to it day after day, and slowly, almost, and even with you guys, without noticing, my thinking becomes more measured and more patient and more grounded. So, benevolence reminds us that um, strength is restraint, and that maturity is knowing when not to act, and that real power lies in responsibility, especially towards the people we love and the relationships that we would like and want to last. So lasting, and these lasting relationships, that they're not built on intensity or grand gestures. They're just built on presence, on um, listening, consistency, and being someone others can rely on over time. Just like reading, just like growth, and just like building a meaningful life. There's no shortcuts. It's just commitment. And if you can commit to showing up with discipline and awareness and care, everything else will begin to align. So I shan't take any more of your time. I think it's been um, a good length of a video today, but I really appreciate you joining me, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next video. So turn your notifications on, please, if you could, so that you are reminded when the next live will be going up, and to keep tabs on the community pages where I, from time to time, post um, numerous little updates. Sometimes I put polls on there, and sometimes I just try to pick your brains, just to see what effect some of these books are having on you. But I do appreciate your time, and I thank you for joining me here on Michael Reads. So if you could like, please share, or simply just subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more interesting things um, coming up down the pipeline. I'm learning as I go, and I'm taking it one step at a time. So have a good weekend, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Ciao.